as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant.
I don't know if you managed to catch it. I was riveted to C-SPAN last night. They are playing the replays of Representative Darrell Iss's hearings in the House on the death of Border Patrol Agent Terry in relation to an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms operation known as Operation Fast and Furious. And let me just preface this by saying, when I have to watch something with Darrell Issa in it, you know my attention is piqued, because otherwise I would change the channel the minute I see the man's face. And it opened up, and if that wasn't bad enough, it opened up with Senator Charles Grassley, Chuck Grassley from Iowa, another guy who's one of the most anti-pot senators out there, who said some of the most reefer-mad things. Yeah, named Grassley. Named some of the most reefer-mad things. You can check out my blog at stash.normal.org for all the history on those two. Anyway, what this has to do with is an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, ATF, operation known as Operation Fast and Furious. And you know, when we're going to start naming our operations after shitty Vin Diesel movies, it's not going to turn out well. This is what they did. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, you know, the people that are in charge of making sure that guns stay out of the hands of killers, right? It's kind of one of their gigs. You know, it's the F there in the ATF. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms were working in Arizona along with gun store owners to encourage these gun store owners to sell weapons to these, what they call straw purchasers. Now, what a straw purchaser is, right? When you go buy a gun, you gotta, you know, be a legit person who can get a gun, right? You can't be a convicted felon. There's all sorts of, you know, rules and forms and things you have to sign. And you also have to check off a little box that says, yes, I'm buying this gun for me. This is my gun, right? So ATF encouraged these gun store owners to allow these straw purchasers, which are guys that come in who are legit, but they don't intend on buying that gun for themselves. No, they're hired by a cartel, they're hired by a gang, they're hired by a criminal to go buy a gun, and then they take the gun to the criminal, who then, you know, now has a gun, right? So ATF was allowing these straw buyers, they were encouraging these gun store owners to allow these straw purchasers to come in, these straw gun purchasers to come in and buy buttloads of weapons over and over again. And we're talking like Romanian AK-47s, 50 caliber rifles, you know, things like that, right? Coming in repeatedly to buy these weapons. And then 3 agents testified on this panel, testified that they were then allowed to surveil the transaction, where the straw purchaser then goes and delivers the guns to the next guy, you know, the criminal who's going to take it, right? And then we're told to stand down from that point after. At that point, they were told to surveil not the criminal who just got the guns, as they would do in a standard ATF firearms sting operation. No, no, no. They were told to go back and surveil the straw purchaser, the guy who had just bought the gun, knowing that the illegal weapons they just let go off into that car trunk with that criminal were headed on their way to Mexico, into the hands of these violent criminals who have killed 34,550 Mexicans in the past 4 years, knowing damn well those guns were going to go kill someone. And it turned out they did. The guns didn't just make their way to Mexico, they also made their way to the United States. In fact, one of the agents testified if he could estimate a ratio of where the guns went. He said 2 to 1 Mexico to U.S. He said for every 2 guns that made it to Mexico, probably 1 gun made it to the U.S. illegally. And they testified furthermore that when these straw purchasers purchase the weapon, right, and they lie on that checkbox, they lie, they call that a buy and lie. That's the kind of case they make, a buy and lie. And that when they check that and they lie and they actually give it to someone else, that the punishment for doing so is usually probation. The max it could be is 10 years. But usually these people, if they have no criminal background whatsoever, if a Mexican cartel hires Russ Belville, me, a guy with no major criminal record, I did get a disturbing the peace, but no major criminal record, I'd be legal to go buy a gun. If I go buy a gun, lie about it, and then take it and sell it to criminals in Mexico to kill, the worst I could get is probation in Arizona, right? The worst I get in probation, where a speck of marijuana can get you a felony charge. But buying a gun illegally and lying about it and giving it to a criminal, hell, we wouldn't want to piss off the NRA now, would we? So this goes to show you, I encourage you to Google this, Operation Fast and Furious, and do more research on it, because the deeper and more entangled you get in this, these 3 ATF agents not only talked about how it was completely against protocol and procedure, they were asked by one of the representatives, they said, in your previous experience, because one of these guys had worked in the Bronx, right, and had done ATF work and firearms work in the Bronx in New York, right? So had some cred. And the representative asked him, in your experience, if you had been doing a gun sting like this and had and you knew guns were walking, that was the term they kept using, was the guns would walk, meaning you wouldn't follow the gun, right? The gun got away. How many guns would have to walk in a case before it would trip your radar, before a flag would go up and you'd freak out? And this ATF officer testified, we wouldn't leave work if a disabled gun, one disabled gun, was allowed to walk. He talked about doing stings where they'd have these firearms and they would mechanically, take the firing pin out or whatever, mechanically fix them so that they wouldn't work. They wouldn't leave work until they tracked that gun down. And then the representative followed up and said, so how many guns did we lose in this Fast and Furious that just ended up walking? And the officer responded in testimony, thousands. Thousands of guns allowed to flow down to Mexico, 2-to-1, 2 to Mexico, 1 to the United States, illegal. Now, this operation was coming from the head of ATF in that area and the U.S. attorney in that area, and I forget the woman's name that was mentioned here. But as they go up the chain of command, they find, no, Department of Justice never authorized this. Obama never authorized this. This all came from rogue Rambo John Wayne cops in the ATF who had this grand idea, and this was their plan. This is at least as far as they could try to imagine what was in the minds of these supervisors. But the idea was that they would allow the guns to go, and then they could follow the guns up this chain to the cartels and then take the cartels down on a buy and lie that you get probation for. On a conspiracy you can't prove because you weren't surveilling anybody, and charging people with crimes in the United States for which they would have to be extradited from Mexico. Right. So that explanation doesn't wash for me at all. When I look at these things, I can't help but think that maybe this is by design. Maybe a whole bunch of guns need to make it to Mexico to make it more violent, and by making it more violent, we have to sell more U.S. aid, more helicopters, more surveillance equipment, more ammunition to our Mexican neighbors. And maybe by allowing it to get more violent, we scare the hell out of Americans into keeping drugs illegal a little bit longer. I'm generally not a conspiracy theory guy, and I'm not suggesting that is at all what's going on, but when you look at the results of it, if that were the plan, it's working. I mean, this is what's going on. And this is how reefer mad our law enforcement have become when it comes to drugs. Because we're talking about Mexican drug war, drugs, drug cartels, drugs, all logic, protocol, all past ways of doing business go out the window. They allowed guns. And the gun store owners, by the way, in this testimony, if this is on C-SPAN, go watch it. I know C-SPAN's boring stuff, but it's Elijah Cummings is there. The ranking member had a lot of stuff. And this was very telling, too. Kaliko, maybe you can help me with this. Didn't Elijah Cummings suffer from some sort of gun homicide in his family or shooting or something?
I think I vaguely remember.
Yeah, there's some story about Cummings being... Well, wasn't Cummings part of, MLK's posse? And
oh no, that was John Lewis.
Thank you. Okay, wrong guy. Anyway, but he'd had some gun, was a victim of gun crime in his gun death in his family as well. So it was very compelling testimony. Now, some of the stuff that was disturbing about it was during the testimony, one of the ATF agents started to say, maybe if we had a mandatory minimum of 1 year for doing these buy-and lies, we could, cut down on this. And Isa the little NRA chip that the GOP implants in the base of their reptilian lizard brain just started going off, because ICE was like, oh, order, we'll come to order. The testimony here, this is about the killing of by the way, the reason this all come up, by the way, this whole thing, Operation Fast and Furious, has come up because one of the guns that got away, of the thousands that got away, ended up killing the Border Patrol agent. They were able to trace it and find out, oh, this is one of the guns we let get away. It killed a Border Patrol agent. So God knows if these guns had only killed Mexicans and poor folks in America, whether or not with this hearing would even be happening. Okay? But anyway, the little chip goes off in ICE's brain here about, oh my God, we can't piss off the NRA, and starts saying, no, this is not a place to discuss regulations. It's not the scope of this hearing. The scope of this hearing is to discuss the ATF Operation Fast and Furious, blah, 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 blah. And he had to be admonished. It was the gentlewoman from New York was asking the question. I forget what her name was. But she had to be further admonished by Representative Elijah Cummings and a couple of other representatives to say, no, you can control what the committee does as far as the scope of the hearings, but when you're talking about people that are testifying in front of their government, they got the free speech right to say what's on their mind. There is no scope that you can limit them to. And gee, what a novel idea, a mandatory minimum sentence for a crime that actually kills people. I'd actually think about getting behind that. Please, look it up. Operation Fast and Furious. And they're trying to turn this into an Obama thing. You know, Fox News is like, oh, this is a scandal of Obama. This is not an Obama scandal. This would be the same exact story in the Bush administration. This is a drug war scandal. When it comes to the drug war, D or R behind your name doesn't matter. It's the way that our entire system is built to deal with this situation. It's endemic and systemic. Doesn't matter if it's Obama, doesn't matter if it's Bush. It won't matter when the next president comes in unless it's, maybe somebody, but hey, we gotta go. For Kaliko the Intern and Cannabis Carry, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us for our first hour. Get the podcast on iTunes and stash.normal.org. For those of you staying live, stay tuned for Toker Talk Radio. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
We love the earth.